Okay, let me go ahead and get this started. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final session of the study group. So today, yeah, we have with us James, Tiffany, Gareth Edwards, and Steph McTeef again. Thank you very much, gentlemen. This has been a phenomenal experience for everybody here, and yeah, some people from the community are reaching out, right? And letting us know that this is actually helping people. So that's cool. At least 1, 2 people are getting something out of this. So excellent. Today we're going to go over a couple of things, right, that James mentioned at the end of the last session that we little tidbits that we didn't get to, and which includes the vSphere Supervisor possibly. And then let me go ahead and dive in a little bit to the changes. So there have been changes to the exam guide or the exam itself. I saw yesterday that you can no longer schedule the 2024 exam in Pearson View. So now you have to take the 2025 version. But the good thing is that there aren't major changes. It's just the verbiage. And so it's no longer the vSphere with Tanzu. It's no longer I as control plane. It's the vSphere supervisor. And so those are some of the things. Gareth also pointed out there are some more CLI questions in there, and there are 10 less questions that you need to answer. So instead of having 70 questions, now you only have 60 questions to get right, or 60 questions total, not to get right. You still have to score 300 on there to pass, but yeah, luckily we're still on track. The community exam guide, I went in there last night and was updating a couple of sections just so that we can include some CLI troubleshooting things, and then I'm going through the vSAN portion of it too, just so we can expand it. Yeah, before the acquisition, we used to have the VMware Docs site that made it fairly easy, right, to go in there and grab and download the PDF files for the admin guide and all those kinds of things. Now when I do it, there has been an update on that. I'm not sure when, or maybe I just found out. But if I Google or if I search for Tech Docs, Broadcom, and then the product, the very first hit that comes up, it gives you the PDF, and you can select your version, and it's like it's a PDF that includes all of the PDFs underneath it. So it's pretty cool. It makes it way easier for me to look up and give you all information. All right. So with that, let me go ahead and pass it off. James usually speaks now. So James, handing off to you.
Cheers, Frankie. Hello, everyone. So as we mentioned last time, we ran slightly out of time. So there were some bits that we just wanted to cover. These were the final bits going through the blueprint that over the past sessions, we've described VCF and everything like that, and we'll do a recap at the end. But it was a way of covering all of the pieces that were in the blueprint. So these are the last 2 sections to go through. So we'll get through these quickly. So encryption is one of them, and the blueprint asks about enabling encryption and bits and pieces like that. So there's 2 ways of doing encryption. So there are KMS, key management servers. These are third-party vendors that you can purchase their software, and it will allow you to configure it and be able to then start using encryption. So a couple of things around that is obviously, one, you have to pay for them. They're not free. There are loads of vendors out there, and they're all in the compatibility. There is the one thing to point out, a warning that you probably want to read if you are looking at using a third-party KMS system around support and how that's going to look going forward. So just take that into account if you are looking to do this going forward. So you have that option, and the other option you have is that in vSphere 7 Update 2, VMware introduced their own version of a KMS, which is the native key provider. So this is inbuilt into Virtual Center. It's something that you can activate in there. There's some steps that we'll go through in a minute, but what that allows you to do is not have the requirement of a third party. And because I almost said free, but obviously you've already paid for the license, so it's not free, but it is included in that license, so there would be no additional cost once you have that the vSphere license. So encryption can be enabled in 3 areas inside the product. You can do a VM level encryption. You can encrypt the vSAN data store, and once a key manager is set up, you can also then activate secure vMotion traffic as well. So that will then encrypt any of your vMotion traffic that takes place. So if we have a quick look, so there's multiple of places that you'd need to go to. The first bit is that all of so you can have multiple KMSs. They are configured at the root level under security, and then there's key providers. So in here, you can add the native or a standard one. So that would be your third party one. So that will have required for you to have configured it, got it online, is contactable, IP address all set up and ready to go, and then you can choose to add it. And for the native one, it's as simple as that. But before you can start using it, you have to back it up. Obviously, this is going to be encrypting things. It's quite important. So before you can start using it, it's a requirement that you take a backup, protect it with a password. And obviously, you'd want to save that password somewhere else as well, because you will need it to recover if anything goes wrong. And then you'll get your file at the end of it that you would then copy back up somewhere else to make sure that you've got that. Obviously, you want it out of your vSphere environment, because if anything goes wrong with your vSphere environment, you want to have the ability to gain access to it so that you can do recoveries. So under the services, you can now see that under data services, you've got data in rest, at rest encryption, and data in transit encryption. So in here, you can activate those now. Before that was enabled, you wouldn't have been able to enable those. So doing the vSAN data store encryption will do a rolling reformat of the environment. So just take into account that is obviously moving a substantial amount of data. It will go through all of the data stores. So the bigger your cluster, the more data stores, the more servers are affected and everything like that. So it's something that if you can do, you'd want to try and do once before a huge amount of data goes on there. But obviously it is something you can do. It just might have a residual effect on performance for a period of time while it's running through that rolling reformat. Then you have the ability Stefan showed last week around being able to set up vSAN storage policies to enable you to place virtual machines onto encrypted data stores as well. But that was just a very brief. This is, something that you don't need to, dig into a huge amount of details necessarily, but there's some links there that detail it in a lot more detail. It goes into all the details of it, how to configure it, but there's a couple of good videos on there that go into it in a lot more detail than you probably need, but they're good to just have in your back pocket. I think the longest one's about a 30-minute video, so that just gives you the understanding of encryption, what it can do for you, but also some of the things that you need to take into account. One of the things, because in the native key provider, it's built into Virtual Center, you've got the ability to recover it, and it plays well with things like vSAN. But if you are encrypting a vSAN data store and you're using a third-party KMS, the last thing you want is to have that KMS on the data store that could be affected. So that's another design decision that you might have to take into account, is the placement of a third-party KMS inside your environment to make sure that you don't get into the chicken and egg situation, that if you lose the whole environment and you're trying to bring it back up again, if the KMS is on the data store that you're trying to bring back up again, you can get into that issue of maybe not being able to bring it back up again. But they're all design decisions that to understand before you start working on it. So that was just a quick whistle-stop tour. Like I say, those links can explain it a lot better than I can. When it comes to maintenance, so placing a host into maintenance mode, everyone's done it before. There are some some people might not have had any hands-on with vSAN or anything like that. So as just a quick run through, is that when you place a host into maintenance mode in normal vSphere, it'd ask you if you want to move the machines and stuff like that. But inside vSAN, it will actually ask you, it will give you 3 options. So those 3 options, by the default option is ensure data accessibility. And what that does is that is only looking to move objects that will become non-compliant if you're shutting down a host. So that makes sure you keep to your storage policy, that all of the parts of the machine are accessible, so that it means that you won't have an issue if something else happens. So this is the one that you'd use most of the time if you were, say, just rebooting a server, maybe sorting a memory module that had failed or gone a bit funky. Then 9 times out of 10 you would use this, because it's quick, because it only migrates essential components rather than the one we'll talk about in a minute. And once it comes back up again, it will resettle down. The other option is to actually evacuate all data. So you would normally do this if you were, say, removing a host from the cluster, if you were if you had disk issues that or the host is going to be down for a large period of time. And then you can evacuate all of the data. It would then spread that data amongst all of the other across the vSAN data store on other hosts, and you could then do the work on it. But the thing to take into account is, obviously, depending on the size of your nodes, that could be a fair chunk of data. That data is moving around, which is going over the vSAN network. So it could potentially have maybe a little bit of a impact there. And as it says there, you can't actually do that on a 3-node cluster. So just to take that into account. And the other one is no data evacuation. So you would use that normally when you were shutting down the vSAN cluster, because last thing you want to do is choose the other ones and have data balancing around while you're trying to shut down nodes and things like that. Just to show it in a bit more. So you can see ensure accessibility is the default option, and then you get to choose the other ones. Some inbuilt safety features around this is if you go to the pre-check function and actually run a pre-check, you can see that it's selected the host that that you had originally chosen. And what it does is it goes through a series of, it plans out what the impact of taking that host down will be. So it tells you that 56 objects will become non-compliant. So you understand what's going to happen when you place it in there. The great thing is it will do a check on the actual cluster capacity. So it will make sure there's enough room in the cluster to move all of those objects that are not compliant. So it means that you're not trying to put a host into maintenance mode when you don't have, say, the capacity to be able to do that. And then it just shows you what the health will look like on it. And it gives you the ability to then enter maintenance mode without having to jump back to that other window. So it gives you that ability to run a little bit of a check. And obviously, because it's non-impacting, you can actually run that, say, before your change window so that you can understand what might be affected. Obviously, that might change if machines move and things like that, but it will give you a bit of a warm and fluffy feeling that everything will potentially go to plan once you try and place that host into maintenance mode. So that was just a little bit in case people hadn't had much exposure to vSAN.
Okay. So just one of the extra bits I wanted to touch upon. We're not going to go into it in too much detail because if you look at the actual blueprint, there's only certain things that's actually covering. So one of the bits around, I guess we've got many names to cover it here, kind of Tanzu, VKS, TKG, IaaS control plane. We're looking at effectively containerized workloads. Knowing what the prerequisites for being able to deploy that is going to be quite important. So on screen you can see this is the default kind of prereq wizard that appears. So you're going to need to obviously make sure you've got the right licensing in place. You have a workload domain. Unfortunately, I don't have one in here anymore because of the rollback I just had to do. You need an edge cluster again. Was a casualty of the reboot. You need various subnets, and you also need a content library that we covered last week. So if we were to select them, you would go through into another wizard. You would select a workload domain. I don't have one that I can select. This is my management workload domain, which then says sorry. You can't do that at the moment because there's no edge cluster in there. And you would be able to continue through this particular wizard. Again, hands-on labs might be your friend here. Go and take a look at some of those, and you should be able to go through these wizards to get a little bit of experience with those. What I have got, if we've got long enough, I've only got 4 minutes left. No, where's the extend time button? Oh well, we'll get through this in a very quick 4 minutes. If you were to take a look in a workload enabled domain, you would then in your vCenter for that domain start to see something like this if it was a populated environment. So what we've got here is our usual objects. We've got our vCenter, data center, cluster, and host objects. But then we've got some slightly different ones if you've never seen these. So we've got a namespace, and then we've got various other container-based objects. Now, we've got things like supervisor, control plane machines in there. That there is all sorts of bits and pieces in here, and we could probably spend a lot of time on this. But if we were to then actually take a look in workload management, we've actually got 3 different namespaces configured here. They've got a supervisor. So if we click over onto the supervisor pane, we've got details of that, which is running 3 namespaces on 3 hosts. And if we drill into that, it's just showing us similar information, but a more drilled down view. And we have the option over here to create a new namespace, which doesn't really ask for a huge amount of information. So this, well, actually, let us do it. There you go, created quickly and as easily as that. And it's now off doing its thing, configuring all the components that it needs to do that. You've got various monitor tabs and options, not a huge amount in this particular lab. But these tabs are probably fairly familiar with the rest of the different vSphere objects. We've got various configuration settings. We can set limits, so you can start to restrict a namespace to a limit of CPU memory and storage requirements. So if you don't want a group of developers with a particular namespace to basically take all they can eat, you can then start to set limits against them. You can also have permissions to those namespaces as well. So if you're looking to just allow a certain group of developers, admins, group of people to have access to this namespace, you can then start to do our back here. And then we've got various other bits and pieces that are all very familiar if you're familiar with the Kubernetes world and container world. It's not necessarily my forte, so I'm not going to bore you all with my half-assed attempt at trying to tell you exactly what these are. Just be aware that they do exist. You shouldn't have to go into this much detail as part of the exam, because we're now getting into some sort of deeper configuration and not administration. We can set storage policies on here. James just touched upon those not too long ago. If you've got a storage policy available, there's just a couple in here. You can start to select those and again put different storage characteristics against your containers. Let's just drop back. Is there anything else on there I wanted to show? Perhaps that's probably a worthwhile screen to show to make you aware of the options that are there. I'm not going to confess to know exactly all of those, but they are there. And various updates as well that you can go and select. So we've got the different Kubernetes versions and things like that.
One of the requests from last week was just to go over a little bit of a recap of what we've covered over the past 4 or 5 weeks. So I will hand over to Stefan to start going through just a little bit of a recap.
We'll just go back kind of a bit of an overview. We've still got half an hour, so do keep the questions coming in if you've got any. So if we let me click that button. There we go. If you've not seen what a VCF instance looks like, it's when you first log into an SDDC manager. This is what it looks like. So this is your summary page. We've got details of different workload domains. In this case, I've only got one management domain. I've got no other workload domains at the moment. I haven't enabled workload management in the Kubernetes wireless control plane stuff or VKS or whatever you know it by. We've got various memory stats, etc. For the entire SDDC. If we were to go into workload domains, this is now where you would start to see things like your management domain, and you can see that based on the type. If you have multiple workload domains, you would then start to see those listed here. So if I go into this particular one, you've got details around things like services. I think I've got a bit of an error here about my ESXi licensing at the moment. Yeah, because it all again fell over not too long ago. So you've got some quick links here out into your vCenter server UI or your ESXi UI. We have the update patching stuff. Again, we got that in a previous session where you were able to go in and see something. There we go. And we can start to look at selecting versions that we want to upgrade our various components to. So I'm going to take the latest version of NSX, latest vCenter, latest ESXi, and there happens to be a patch for SDDC Manager as well. You can do SDDC Manager here, but equally we were to drop into lifecycle management, there is also a way of doing it here. So not too long ago, I just clicked the button to download and just brought down the 2 gig that were needed for that upgrade. And I actually have the option to hit upgrade now. I won't do that because that will take us off to another screen that we won't be able to do anything else with. We've got other options in here, either off this 3 dots to either add another cluster, so a traditional vSphere cluster into that management domain. We can add an edge cluster for NSX. We can add an application virtual network or AVN in here. So there's some way you can deploy the ARIA lifecycle suite manager into. Also rename if you like. You also have those same options with a couple of extras off this menu here as well. There's details of hosts, details of the cluster. If I still had an NSX Edge cluster, it would have showed you that here. And we have various certificate options as well. Now, at the moment, I think yes. So these were CA issued certificates, I believe. And I took my snapshot. Wait about one time from. The life of me, I can't see it. No, these are self-signed ones still. So I must have rolled that one back as well. I've got a lot of words catch back up on to get this back where it needs to be. But what you can do in here is with a integrated certificate authority, which if I go down here into the security section, you are able to integrate it's dropped out in my config, unfortunately. I could put in the cert serve URL from my Microsoft certificate authority, for instance, along with a set of credentials and also a template that had already been configured on my CA. Once I've got that integrated here, and I should probably point out, you have the option to open SSL as well. You would then be able to make use of the certificate management processes inside SDDC Manager. So if I was integrated, I'd be able to select things like my vCenter server, hit generate CSR, which it will go off and do. And then once it's done that, I could actually click this button here, which says generate signed certificates. It would go off to that configured CA, generate certificates, bring them back, and then you would get the option then to hit the install certificate. This can take away quite a lot of pain, especially if you've got traditionally your CA is managed by another team, perhaps, and you would be, maybe using this more manual process over here after generating the CSR. You download it, send it to the team that needed to do certificate, and then you would come back, upload it, and install it. You can take away all of that and actually do it all from the workflows inside of here. If we were to go back to, go to bundle management. So in the update planner that we took a brief look at, once you've selected various components, you can either download them from a button in the other screen, or you could also come in here and hit download in here as well, or you could have downloaded various components ahead of time, should you wish. Some of these aren't exactly the smallest set of bundles in the world, depending on the link you've got to download them across. So do bear in mind, if you are planning upgrades, making sure you've got enough space on SDDC Manager to be able to download all these bundles. So if you're perhaps on upgrade 3, 4, 5, 6, you've downloaded lots of different bundles over time and not cleared them out, you're going to end up that you might have a bit of a disk space issue. So it's always worth just checking that on the appliance. And then you can come in here and download some of these bigger bundles should you need to. We've got network settings in here. So as part of the bring up process, you would specify 2 different network pools, one for vSAN and one for vMotion. Should you want to then deploy additional workload domains, but perhaps with a segregated set of networks for both of these services, you can come in here and actually define those for what they are with the various network types. You've also got options in here for NFS and iSCSI, should those be needed in your environment. We've got DNS configuration. So if you needed to make a DNS configuration, you can make that centrally here. Same with NTP as well. I won't click on the licenses tab because it will save Frankie some editing later on. But that is just a pretty standard looking screen where you'll have a very similar looking interface to vSphere, where you would be able to put in a key put a description, put a name, and away you go. And then you better consume those as part of additional host deployments as clusters and things like that. You've got the single sign-on configuration. So you've got the more traditional providers of LDAP and things like that. So if we go down here, we've got AD over LDAP or Open LDAP, but you've also got things like Okta, Microsoft ADFS, and Microsoft Entra ID, or what was Microsoft Active Directory. Sorry, no, wasn't that, was it? Azure AD, Azure Active Directory is once called. Did take me by surprise when I last logged into my Azure portal and was like, where's AD gone? And there's no other provider about this at the moment. I guess one of the other things that came in 5.2 was around proxy. So if you're behind a web proxy, traditionally in older versions, you would have had to have a direct route out for this. But what you can now do is actually configure a web proxy. So if you're in an organization that has policies dictating that you need to put traffic through a web proxy, you can now go in here, put in the usual looking details for a web proxy, and away you go. I'm not going to click on depot settings either, so you don't end up seeing a bunch of stuff in there. But what this is your ability to connect to the Broadcom download portal by putting in your Broadcom account details. This then enables the download of these through here. So this has been auto-populated in the last sort of half an hour or so while we've been on the call after I reconnected the repo, the depot, and it's actually come and said that I've got all these available for download should I now need them. And you also have the option there to be able to set up an offline depot. So if you've got multiple SDDC instances and you want to be able to reference a offline copy, so not everything is trying to go out to the internet, or you're in a dark site, you have the option to use offline depots there. We just keep going down through the list really. We mentioned briefly about AVNs earlier, application virtual networks. Again, take a look at one of the older recordings. We did go into that in a little bit more detail on one of the videos, but this is all dependent on having an edge cluster, so you need an NSX edge cluster to be able to deploy this, which at the moment you can see here is not. We can't do an ARIA lifecycle suite deployment because we haven't done a edge deployment. Therefore, we weren't able to do an AVN deployment, and X region is one of the two regions that get deployed. So you end up with a X region or a region A. Region A would be a local region for an address space which was local to the SDDC instance, which you would deploy things like ARIA operations for networks into. Operations for logs even, where you want a more localized instance of that. But then for things like ARIA automation, where you're going to want some cross-site resiliency potentially, having the X region, which would be a stretched network, would be able to then keep those alive in the event of some DR. And then once you have those two things in place, you'd be able to hit the deploy button here, and it would go and deploy the VMware ARIA Suite Lifecycle Manager into your estate. Kind of gives us a little bit of a segue into password management. If you have deployed Lifecycle Manager and respective products via that route rather than independently, you would then also get different resource types in here. So you would start to see those other ARIA components appear in here for password management as well. But we haven't got that at the moment. So we're just seeing some of the basics for the bare minimum deployment that we've got here. So we've got our ESXi accounts. So we've got the standard root accounts. We've got various service accounts, which are used between SDDC manager and the hosts. We've got NSXT accounts, one for each account in there. We've got audit, root, and admin. We've got the SSO or PSC account in there as well, and a couple of other vCenter surface accounts. What we can do with these, if I select the audit one, we've got some options that then appear. So I have the ability to rotate the password. So we can tell SDDC manager, please rotate this password to a new one, which we can then extract using some of the basic, using some of the default kind of password extraction methods. So you can either use on the CLI password lookups. No, I get that wrong every time, don't I? Lookup passwords, I think it is. Password lookups. whichever the CLO. I can never get that one the right way around. You've got the API for being able to, and we'll have a look at that in a second. You can do a export in JSON format of all of the passwords from the SDDC manager database. And there'll be your two main methods really for getting those credentials out and then storing them in a password management solution. We can schedule rotations. So on a schedule, as it says, we'll be able to set that up. You can set 30, 60, and 90 days on those. You also have a couple of others here, which is update and remediate. So if you wanted to update a password for your NSX root account, for instance, and you wanted to dictate what the password was, you would be able to use the update password option. You'd specify the password, SDDC manager would talk to the endpoint, being NSX, and go and update that password. And then we have the other one, which is remediate password. And now this one is, I guess that I've used it personally most for when I've let my passwords expire, in which case I've gone on to the specific endpoint and where the expiry has occurred. I have manually changed the password using the appropriate procedure for whichever endpoint that is. And then I'm coming back now to SDDC manager to say, I need to remediate what you hold in your database to match what is in the live appliance. So you would then put in what you'd manually change it to using the remediate password option. And as I said, if you have got ARIA lifecycle and components deployed in the integrated form through here, you would see some additional resource types appear in this list. Backup. So it is recommended that you use a third party, something separate to your vSphere or VMware infrastructure to be able to back all this up to. By default, your NSX backs up to the SDDC manager on a very specific share, which may or may not be alive yet. I'll see if that comes alive in a second and we can take a final quick look at that. Here we go. Basically, there is a share on the SDDC manager by default in which NSX backs up to. So if I go into system, and this is your NSX manager, get a backup and restore. By default, this share is where NSX is going to back up to, and that is on my SDDC manager appliance. That's automatically set to do it at intervals of an hour by default. With vCenter, however, it isn't by default. I think again I've lost that configuration as well. Yeah. In my particular lab, I happen to use the same share for my backups just to help me out. But again, you'd want to configure all of these really to a third-party backup location so that you've actually got them somewhere outside of this environment should you have a problem. And then we're kind of through it. Oh, no, we said about API, actually. Let's go over here. So if we go down to Developer Center and go API Explorer, all of the SDDC Manager APIs that exist are all in here. And we spoke about the password one earlier. So if I go down here to credentials, and I can look at the get credentials, I can actually just hit execute directly in the UI. It has now gone and pulled me all the passwords for all the components. You have the ability to download the file. You can copy the content of that response to the clipboard, or you could just actually click in here. So this is just an FTP account that's built into the into SDDC Manager. I haven't specified any of that. Away it goes. You can get those details directly from in there as well. As you can see, there's loads of different APIs available in here, and you can execute them all from within here.
So there was a question around licenses and replacing those. So once you've actually added the license into the license section, if you then whether it be the management or if you had workload domains. If you then go into the actual, whichever environment you want to change the licenses on and do update licenses, you then get the option to choose the product that you want to make the change on. And if you had multiple licenses in there, you could choose another one. So what you can't do is add, so the single license key has to be enough to do whatever change. You can't add multiple license keys. So if you wanted to add, say, more ESXi licenses, you'd have to combine those licenses before adding them into the SDDC manager. From there, you could then make the change, do next, and then it will go away and deploy the licenses. So hopefully that answered that question.
It looks like it has, yeah.
So yeah, so Stefan's gone through the majority of stuff on here. And again, all the sessions are recorded. Hopefully one of the things you will have taken away if you've seen this and the other sessions is, I'd say 80 or 90% of the demos we've done have been from the hands-on labs. So that is going to help you no end once you actually get into the hands-on labs, which is free. You just sign up with the account. You know, you can come in, filter by, say, Cloud Foundation, because that's what we're talking about. And then you get all of these sessions. Frankie's been put in, and the guys have been putting the links into, you know, some of the ones we've been using. But you've got like the getting started, you've got operations. You could jump on that and have a poke around operations if that's something you'd not got much hands on. Same with logs. You can play around with NSX. And the great thing is that it's not tied down to, you know, you have to follow the exact script it's talking about. You've seen us play around in there, and you can just get yourself used to it, where things are, what steps you need, you know, the requirements for an edge deployment. If you go through the edge wizard, it will show you all of the things you need. And I find that that's quite a good way of visualizing what and learning what might be required, is by, you know, just clicking through, and then you see it come up and, oh, I've got to have these passwords, these IP addresses and things like that. And then you can potentially work backwards to understand why they're required. The topics that we've covered were based on the blueprint. So we took the blueprint, we then worked out, you know, each of these different sections, the, you know, the ways to cover it and everything like that. So it should now have covered pretty much everything on the blueprint.
No, I think I'm just going to answer perhaps the latest question live as well. Is you know, how long would you say it takes for somebody to prepare for this exam? That's kind of a bit of an open question, really, in that it really depends where you are at as terms of your knowledge and exposure and experience. If you've never seen it before, you know, VCF, and you've never taken an exam before, you're probably going to take a little bit longer than somebody that's been doing VCPs for years and has been using VCF for years. So it's quite a difficult question to answer, really. But you know, as James has probably just alluded to there, really, we've covered as much of the blueprint as we can. We've tried to point everybody in the right direction, and everything that's in those hands-on labs and the blueprint. If you're comfortable with the topics, you're probably going to be quite close to being able to do well on the exam.
So the follow-up question, I think, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, Frankie, I think you'd be a good person to answer that, considering how you took the exam. It was followed up with someone who's familiar with vSphere, NSX, Kubernetes, but not familiar with SDDC. Hence why I thought you'd be a good one to answer that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I had never played around with VCF. I've never seen the SDDC screen prior to actually studying for this exam, and even then, I only went through. I think I deployed an HOL, and I saw it, And I was like, all right, cool. And then I shut off the HOL. And then I went over to YouTube videos, and that's it. I realized it's just not the way that I was able to learn. So yes, I had zero experience with the SDDC manager, but just learning the concepts, right? Pretty much what was covered in the first 2 sessions here, that helped a lot. And but yeah, no, I have experience. I had experience with vSphere, vSAN, a tiny sliver of NSX, and the ARIA suite, right? So those are my areas, and I didn't know Tanzu. I didn't know that kind of stuff. Yes, and I was able to pass it on the first try. Not everybody's going to get the same questions, so yeah, just be aware of that. But yeah, no, yeah. If you follow this series, if you have experience with vSphere, that is the chunk, right? It is core, right? It is core vCenter or vSphere. You know, the functions in there. If you look at the exam objectives that are in there, there is a ton. It's just a huge section of that. And then yes, the SDDC manager. So if you go back and look at the recordings, I think you're in a good spot. Yeah, you don't need to be a complete expert in Tanzu. You don't need to be a complete expert in vSAN or any of the other products. So
yeah, hands-on lab is your friend. I'll just back that up.
The only other bit that I would say is probably worthwhile understanding in any which way you can is the bring up process, which you're not necessarily going to get on a hands-on lab because it's already going to have been brought up for you. Definitely understanding that process, and James did a good coverage of that in one of the earlier sessions. So you will get to see the bring up spreadsheets and some of the process. And I think we have one of the videos in there somewhere, didn't we, James? That we put together once upon a time, kind of showing you a time lapse of the process. Definitely worthwhile understanding what's required. And just you didn't have it on your list there, Carlos, but Frankie mentioned it, is the ARIA suite. The exam does cover the ARIA suite, so being familiar with basic administration tasks and navigation will be a good starting point for you.
Yeah, all I was going to highlight quickly is, we keep saying about it, this is your kind of fountain of all knowledge. If you're following anything, the exam guide is your friend. As Frankie said at the kind of top of this call, there have been some slight changes. The 2 bits I kind of picked out was, it says now 1 year experience.
can you zoom in?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I will zoom in because I just realized I've got a massive screen. So in the 24 exam, it recommended 1 to 2 years experience working IT. Again, it's just verbiage change. They reckon now it's 1 year kind of experience working IT. So, you know, this is an exam that if you've kind of gone through this, Frankie's done an awesome job of his community guide. But all I'm going to say is buzzword bingo. Someone earlier was asking about SDDC. Find an objective, put that into hands-on labs. You will quickly find a guide, no doubt, on how to do this. So, you know, as I've been speaking to people kind of offline with some of this, is I said, go through this. I've gone old school with some people, a red, yellow, green highlighter. Greens, I know it. Yellow, I need to brush up. Reds definitely don't. And just go into the hands-on labs and find them. I know we've got a little bit of time left. We've done all this prep. We've done all the hard work. And I just really, really quickly want to cover exam day. Some of you may be fortunate to actually go to an exam center. Unlike me, my exam center is a long, long way away, so I will be doing it at home. We've kind of seen it in the chat here, is you can't have multiple screens. I've nearly failed an exam before because I tried docking my laptop and having a second screen, and I nearly got kicked out the exam. You can only have 1 screen. So do clear your desk on the day, and sometimes go old school. I've gone back to my own personal PC with a screen, cleared my desk, put my company laptop in the drawer. It's just much easier because they will take photos of your desk on exam day. So just be conscious that they will check your working space. It needs to be clear, you know, notepads, everything gone. And a really simple thing that this through someone is having a decent webcam, or having some form of webcam that can see you, much like we're all seeing each other right now. That does need to happen if you're taking it home. So if you've got a laptop, you're going to close the screen on, and that's where your webcam is. You're not going to get past the gate. So, you know, there is a rather extensive guide on Pearson VUE's website as well of things to check prior. I'd really recommend just going through this. Just so you're comfortable on exam day, make sure everything's happy. I believe when you book your exam, you can do a little check as well. So do run through that and make sure that everything's working. Again, we're all techies here. Go old school sometimes if you can. Get an Ethernet cable. That has saved me once before. Just cover everything you can. And even it sounds really simple. Back to basics. Make sure you've well rested the night before. Try and get that extra hour of sleep. You'll be amazed what difference that can make. I've nearly failed because my pet's come in before. So it sounds really silly. Check your door. My door's moved before, and I had the invigilator question me why my door was moving. It was my cat coming into the room. So just simple little things. Close your doors. Just tell people you're taking the exam. Phones to do not disturb, all those kind of things. And again, really simple thing. Getting yourself ready in the right mental space is I took a 15-minute walk before my exam. Got out of my house, just went for a walk around my area quickly, got back, got myself set up in the zone. So, look after yourself, test your machine, clear your desk. I know that's not the easiest thing for all of us. And just make sure you're in a space where you can't be interrupted. So if you are going to your office for the day, be crystal clear with your colleagues. Do not open that door. The moment they open that door, could be a failure on your exam. So, just make sure that if you are taking it somewhere, it's somewhere where you can't be disturbed. And that's my very quick wrap up in 5 minutes on exam day. The thing about decorations, I'm going to laugh. Believe it, there's a TV behind me. They have made me take that off the wall before, despite unplugging the power cable. So even choose your room wisely. I think there's actually I've got 2 more seconds.
Well, you're finding that, Gareth. There is a question coming in about decorations, etc.
Yeah.
Well, you've obviously just mentioned about your TV. I've equally had a very different experience in that you can't actually see it on here, but there is stuff around me. As long as it doesn't have your revision notes clearly on them, and it's all the answers up behind you on a list, and it's well out of arm's reach, you kind of get away. You don't have to necessarily strip your room bare of inanimate objects. Things like monitors are a little different, but yeah, I think you just got to be sensible with it, really. If you're not sure,
play it safe. I think this is the one that's always made. It depends on the invigilator on the day. Is this one here? That's caught me short before. They didn't like the fact that my laptop and my monitor was on my desk. But again, you might get lucky on the day. It's just to try and lower your nerves. And also, one thing I did forget is your ID. Make sure you've got a passport or driving license or something like that. It's all covered when you're, going through actually setting it off. And this one, I don't know if we all want to end on a joke. You've got to remain fully closed during your exam. I don't know why, but clearly they've had a problem in the past. That's a new one, but it just made me chuckle when I read that today. I was like,
clearly not done that at some point. And they've now had to put a sign up about it.
Yeah, clearly someone's had some fun during their exam. But honestly, best of luck to everyone taking their exam. We're here. The Discord's still there. Good luck, everyone, and just get yourself in the right state of mind before the exam. Good night's sleep, good breakfast or whatever, dinner, and best of luck to you all.
Okay, so as we wrap this up, thank you very much, gentlemen. As we wrap this up, let's talk next steps. Why not? So this is all hypothetical. So yesterday I shared, I don't even, oh gosh, I don't even know where I shared it, but I was working on the architect exam guide, and I shared it somewhere. Forgive me, I don't know where I shared it, but yeah, just so I can get some feedback. So is that something people would be interested in? Y'all, is that something you three would, and Walde, right? You three would be able to help with?
I'm happy to support it. Let's get people
Excellent.
get people fast.
So with that exam guide, it's not as it wasn't as straightforward as the administrator one, because that one, when at least my experience when taking the architect exam, that was Yeah, it's so like the administrator one, right? It's the administrative task. Like, okay, go in here and do this. Click, click, click. Right here's this process. Here's what you like it, man. You got to do this, this, this. But then the architect one was not like that. It's like, hey, here, think of a scenario, and then it's like, man, there's a whole bunch of scenarios, right? It's the what if, it's the ultimate what if game. And so the exam guide that I took that into account, but it doesn't cover all scenarios, right? So it was if anybody wants to help, there's so cool. Thank you, Walden. Yeah, so if anybody clicks on Waldemar just shared the link to it. If you have questions about it, if you want to contribute to it, or if you need corrections, right, or if you want to add additional things, just go ahead and let me know. My email address is in there. Excellent. All right. And so a lot of people are saying yes, perfect. All right, all I needed was for one community member to say yes. Perfect. Thank you very much. All right, so I won't put I'll go ahead and stop the recording. Oh no, I think we should say bye. I know, see, I won't stop the recording. We'll say bye eventually. I'm not going to put you on the spot right now, but yes, let's put a meeting together. Let's plan on doing something like that. We did have community members last week mention it, and they offered assistance as well. Yeah, so I think that'll be a good one to run to. All right, and with that, thank you everyone for your time. And all right, let us know if you have questions. Go ahead and join the Discord, or just reach out to us directly on LinkedIn. I think I started putting the links. I started getting better at that as time went by over on the YouTube. So perfect. Thank you very much for that. Excellent. All right, thank you everyone. And this was fun. Thank you. Take care.
See you later. Cheers.
And good luck.